I'm so happy it didn't rain last night like it was supposed to, because I just found this in my backyard when I went out to grill a burger for lunch, because apparently I didn't get an email or a text or anything when FedEx delivered this box, apparently yesterday afternoon. Now, okay, now I want you guys' opinion on this. Okay, so they delivered it to the backyard, which to me makes sense because you want to avoid porch pirate issues and things like that, but I didn't get any kind of text or email or anything saying that my package had been delivered, which means, you know, I'm not somebody who just like goes out in the backyard every single day and looks around to see if there happens to be a package there, because this is actually the first time anything's been delivered to my backyard. And there was no like cover, and yeah, there is rain in the forecast. So anyways, if you were having a, anyway, so I get it, we want to avoid porch pirates, but also would have appreciated an email or something. That's not LG's fault. Again, what is this? So this is the LG Ultra Gear, I can't remember monitor names, 32GS95UE. This is going to hopefully be an upgrade once I try it out for my LG C1 OLED TV. It's a 48-inch OLED TV that I've been using as a computer monitor. It's 120 hertz OLED. It looks beautiful. It has, you know, FreeSync and G-Sync support and all of that, so it works great as a monitor, but it is pretty big, and this is one of the new 32-inch 4K OLEDs that go up to 240 hertz. But what's special about this particular model from LG is that it has a 480 hertz mode. Now, it can only do that when you're rendering at 1080p resolution, so basically it has a big drawback. I wouldn't want to be playing single player games like that, but hey, if I wanted to fire up some Counter-Strike or something like that and really push for those competitive, any little competitive edge I can get, maybe this is the screen to do that. So it had that cool feature. However, this has also been a bit controversial because a lot of people are scared by the fact that it has a matte finish on the display, whereas screens like my LG C1 over here are glossy. And then like this Alienware QD OLED that I have over here, the QD OLED screens, and also the competitors to this LG 4K 240 screen, there's QD OLEDs from other companies that use where their finish, I think it's not actually a glossy finish, but it's like their polarization layer is semi-glossy. So really what we have is semi-matte versus semi-glossy versus, you know, truly glossy. But then the QD OLEDs have raised black levels when there's a lot of light in the room. So what's going to be the right trade-off? Anyway, not a lot of these were in stock. I talked about this in my last video about OLEDs having ruined me. Can't deal with other monitors, but not a lot of 4K 240s in stock at the moment. So I was able to get this LG WOLED in here. The 480 hertz mode sounded pretty interesting. I did buy this myself. This is not sponsored in any way by LG. And let's go ahead and open this thing up and see what I think compared to these. All right, so it looks like we have two HDMI ports, display port, and some USB ports, and the power plug. And then right here, we get the interesting switch from going from the 240 hertz 4K to the 480 hertz 1080p mode. So that'll be kind of fun to play around with. All right, so pretty sure this just slides in there. All right, foot goes on right here. Looks like we just have these little hand screws. So yeah, I think this is the cover for the ports. By the way, the monitor's not, the plastic's not black, it's definitely gray. So just keep that in mind. So yeah, that'll pop over the ports. It looks like these will light up over here. Well, it is definitely a lot smaller than the 48-inch. Hopefully it's not too much smaller. I did want smaller, but we'll have to see how it feels when it actually uses it. Also here you get the shot of the QD OLED. You can kind of tell it's raised black levels just a little bit in a room with light in it. It's not super bright in here. And then here's the WOLEDs, where we have the glossy behind with the C1, and then the more matte finish on this one. Now, I've got to actually play around with this and actually see what I think, but thought that'd be kind of a good shot to take a look at there. A month ago, I spent $1,400 on this new 4K 240Hz OLED display, and the model I picked was a bit of a controversial choice. I thought it was a good choice based on my research, and I have maybe more reservations now that I've bought it than I did when I bought it, although I do still think it's overall an excellent display. Basically, I ended up with this LG version for the reason that I thought the 480Hz mode would be kind of interesting to talk about in a video, see if I cared much about that, get my own hands-on impression of the matte finish versus the semi-glossy finish, which I have access to on my QD OLED ultra-wide over here, although it's not the 4K 240, it's that same kind of QD OLED panel type with the raised black levels and semi-glossy finish, so you can get a pretty good comparison between those. And then I also, again, just that's what was available when I bought it. So now I'm also coming from an interesting place, which is this 4K 240Hz OLED is replacing my previous 4K OLED, which was actually an LG C1 OLED TV that was 48 inches. Now that was honestly a great display, although at 48 inches, it's pretty big for a desk setup. And while I could make it work and was overall pretty happy with it, the pixel density could be a bit low if you were sitting close to the screen for playing games or watching movies, especially streaming video content. If you look closely at a lot of 4K streaming video, it doesn't actually look that high res. The bit rate's kind of low. So that was something where shrinking it down a bit gets you better pixel density. So going down to the 32-inch panel size increases the perceived detail due to it being a higher density, although that's also affected by your distance from the screen. But the other thing was the 120 hertz display, which was the 4K LG C1 OLED. 120 hertz, while great, I did sometimes want it to go a bit further, so having access to the 240 hertz at 4K, and then even trying out the 480 hertz 1080p mode sounded pretty interesting. Also, coming from that 4K OLED TV, that was WOLED, but it's also a actual glossy panel, and not even semi-glossy like I'd kind of describe the QD OLED panels, but a true like glass glossy finish on them. It's extremely reflective. So between the three, my ultra-wide QD OLED with kind of I'd say semi-glossy versus the kind of semi-matte finish on the LG 240 hertz WOLED, and then versus the true glossy finish on the TV, there's definitely some major differences. I actually like when I have the lights off, the matte finish, reducing reflections of, I have an RGB keyboard. So when I'm using my keyboard, it lights up. I like to play in a pitch black room, and the keyboard lights up. And when I have the 48-inch like glossy TV, I would get, I could see like a mirror image of my keyboard reflecting in the screen in dark scenes, which I actually found a bit distracting. And I get much less of that, almost none of that on this finish. So that's a place where I actually find the matte finish to be an improvement. However, I really do actually notice the matte finish as being a bit distracting on a bright white or extremely light colored screen, which almost never happens when I'm playing games. And I think that's really important. When I'm playing games on this display, which is really what I recommend OLED for, it's more of media consumption, especially gaming, where it really truly shines, as opposed to, you know, using a web browser or doing productivity work. But like if I open up Google Docs and I'm on a white page, I almost want to reach up and like try to clean off the screen. So I heard from other people who had reviewed the monitor saying that it wasn't that much of a distraction to them. But when like I said, when I am on a pure white screen, I absolutely feel like there's just almost like a little bit of a film over the image, and I do find it distracting. It's not terrible, and you can absolutely get used to it, but when I'm switching between my displays, as I often do, when I pop over to that one and I do any kind of, like I said, bright white screen, productivity stuff, web browsing, things like that, I absolutely feel like there's a little bit of a film over it and find it distracting. It almost never comes up in gaming. Because on smaller bright highlights, I don't notice it at all. It's really when you get the full or a big chunk of the screen as kind of bright white. I did notice it in one game when I was kind of looking up at the sky and some bright white clouds where I again found it a little bit distracting. So in general, I actually find the matte finish more distracting than I was hoping for. But it's not an absolute deal breaker. However, I have to say that I think if I was buying again and all the various panels were available to me, I think I would try to go with one without the matte finish. I don't think it's a deal breaker. And like I said, I did find it an advantage in certain situations. But I think I would prefer not to have it just due to that slight distraction, little bit of do I need to wipe down my screen kind of a feeling when you get those pure white screens. Anyway, so that's a bit of a distraction. The QD OLED's raised black levels, again, happen in a room where there's more light going on, and like I said, I'm in a very light-controlled environment, so it's easy for me to black out the room. So if you're less able to black out the room, then maybe that would be less of an issue. Now, what do I think about like the color gamut difference? Well, again, I have the ultra-wide QD OLEDs over here, which are perhaps a little bit different than the newer 4K OLEDs, but in general, I don't really notice in use any issues with the color differences on either of them. I think the colors in the images overall look great. So I don't find color gamut differences to be that big of a deal when both of them look so good. I do notice that perhaps the brightness level on this 32-inch monitor feels a bit lower than what I got on my LG C1 TV at the 48 inches. So while I kind of like coming down to the smaller size, I do feel like the bright scenes seem to pop a bit less to me. Although I don't have all that kind of monitor measuring technology that full monitor review channels have, so I can't put a number on that. I'm sure we could look it up from somebody else's testing. But I do notice that it feels like in the same games, there's a bit less of a hit on a big white highlight kind of flash. And in general, that's a place where OLED is a bit weak anyway, compared to the more traditional backlit displays that can get brighter but have noticeable dimming zones whereas OLED doesn't have any kind of halo effect around the lit pixels against dark pixels, since each one is lit individually. Anyway, let's talk about, okay, so is that 480 hertz mode cool at all? Well, I wanted it to be amazing, but I kept, like I said, I could switch back and forth really easily while playing games. So I'm playing the same game, I hit the button to just like A/B test, flipping back and forth. And while I absolutely notice the drop to 1080p from 4K, making my picture look much worse, the smoothness of 240 hertz versus 480 hertz was much less noticeable than if you're jumping from like 60 hertz display to 120. I'll say that when I go from 60 hertz to 120, like if I'm on a 60 hertz display, I literally feel like something's wrong with it. I'm so used to high refresh rate that I can instantly tell if it's not like 120 hertz or better display. Because 60 hertz, even just moving your mouse around in Windows, I can instantly see it looks bad to me. Whereas 120 looks pretty good, and 240 does look a little better than 120 did, but it's, again, it's kind of a diminishing returns there. And once I'm at that 240 hertz, the motion fluidity in anything that I'm playing is so good that while I can, if I'm really looking for it, tell some perceived improvement from the 480 hertz, it's not that noticeable to me. Now, before I had kids, I was definitely playing a lot more competitive games. And I was trying to be in that, top 5%, top 2%, top 1% on the leaderboards, really trying to grind the competitive stuff in a ton of different types of games. And maybe if I was still doing that, I would find a bit more value in that 480 hertz mode. But as of right now, most of my gaming is single player, in which 240 hertz is absolutely enough. And I don't notice really much difference at all in single player gaming going up to the 480 hertz. I did bust out some more of the competitive games to try to see if I could find any kind of an advantage there. I didn't feel like I played better when it was at 480 hertz. I didn't really find it tracking to be easier or anything like that. But again, I'm not a pro gamer. So if you're in that like top 0.1% of players, perhaps you're going to get some kind of benefit going from that 240 to the 480. But personally, the 240 was good enough. I don't feel like I'm losing out on a huge amount from that. But dropping down to 1080p certainly looked noticeably worse. And that was more of what I noticed than any kind of benefit from the 480 hertz. Now again, other people with different experiences, different perception, different skill level in esports titles, things like that might have a different opinion on that than I do. And perhaps I'll revisit it in the future to try out a wide variety of games. Maybe I can do a video on is 500 hertz gaming worth it or something like that. But yeah, in just my normal use plus some dedicated testing for the purposes of telling you about it in this video, the 480 hertz mode, I'm probably going to leave it off, at least for my use cases. So let's kind of wrap this up. So in general, I really like moving to 240 hertz from 120 hertz on my 4K OLED display. And overall, this is a great display. I really do like it. But I do find the matte finish distracting in certain situations, and I wish it was glossy. I wish it was glossy. Honestly, I did find, like I said, the matte a little bit better at like not reflecting mirror images off my keyboard and things like that. However, I do like the WOLED technology versus the QD OLED for those, blacker black levels, when that's one of the big things about OLED, but it's not really that big of a deal. So I would be pretty interested in the future at looking at, a WOLED panel that had a glossy finish. But in general, I think this is a good display. But given, if all of the other 4K 240 hertz OLEDs were actually available, so if you're watching this at a time when they are, I really think I'd probably just try to get one of like the cheaper MSI ones because I really don't feel like you're losing out on much going with those versus spending the $1,400 on this one. And like I said, for me, the 480 hertz kind of unique feature this monitor had didn't end up being that big of a selling point. So in general, I like the monitor. It has some advantages over what I had previously, but yeah, I'd probably look at buying one of the other options if they were available in stock, and perhaps I'll even do so in the future to do a little bit of a comparison video. I don't know, they're kind of expensive. Maybe I can get review samples or something. We'll see. Anyway, hopefully you guys found the video follow-up to my OLED monitors ruined me video. This is kind of the follow-up a lot of people wanted to know. In that video, I described choosing this screen, and this was kind of the, okay, I've been using it for a month. How did it go? Like I said, it's good, but yeah, the matte's a little bit distracting on bright white screens. Other than that, pretty cool. It's a good display, and I hope you guys found the video useful and or interesting. I hope all of you have an excellent day.